right. Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi. Good afternoon. Hello.
All right. So this will be a very interactive presentation. One, because this is your opportunity to brainstorm something that will help you in your enterprise. And two, I lost my voice. So I'm going to be doing very little of the talking today. I hope to get through these slides very quickly and hope to give you some opportunity to contribute to your fellow participants here today. My name is Alan Hill, and I'm a recovering project manager. And what I mean by that is I've got a 20-year background in IT, as well as some work doing business consulting. My real passion is business modeling and business entrepreneurship. I happen to have a lot of opportunity to contribute in different ways, but I don't always believe technology is the solution. Sometimes the best solution comes from the ingenuity of looking at the problem in a different way. And then technology can help in that new way. And that's really what I want to present to you tonight. So I'm not so naive to think that this idea, perfectly pitched, dynamically structured, is going to be a perfect fit for your enterprise. That's not the intent today. The intent is to give you something to start with to formulate something that can work in your enterprise if you're in an Agile project or if you're struggling with the way things are done. Anybody struggling with the way things are done? Right? A lot of reporting and very little activity. Right? Yes, I used to work at several corporations, including Best Buy. And here's the thing. What we're fighting is not an intent or a desire to get something done. What I've noticed is that we're fighting the structure of the way things ought to be done. So if you look at a standard waterfall project, the biggest fallacy here is this assumes that on March 27th, 2013, we will have done whatever this task is in perfect harmony. And when you look at it further, how many are project managers or have been involved in project management here? Okay. So the idea that you can schedule something out in advance, and then when you have to re-baseline the project, you make the project match your new reality, and then you say you're back on track, right? Right? And so rather than try to make this fantasy fit reality, why don't we start with a process or a tool that actually accommodates the reality of what we deal with? And one of the things that I noticed early on is when you look at the phrasing and the terminology which dictates the mindset of what you're using, this is about destroying, not creating. You freeze the project schedule, you crash the timeline. If you were talking about doing that at a greenhouse, you'd destroy the very thing you were trying to create. Does that make sense? So that began a several years journey into something that gives us a better tool that works and accommodates the reality of what we're doing. So rather than having things that are not flexible and don't accommodate reality, let's develop a new tool. I read an article several years ago in Fast Company, and it's called The Man from Chaos. And so it's quoted there if you want it. And the link is out on the website. Dick Morley calls himself the father of the programmable logic controller because several people, he says, several people thought of the idea at the same time. And how many are familiar with industrial projects or industrial industries where the manufacturing of the programmable logic controller? Have you guys heard of this? Basically, it's a way to accommodate manufacturing the enterprise in a dynamic and flexible way. So what he decided was that, and as you can see the quotes up there, manufacturing shop floors are very dynamic places. And in my mind, that's just like a project. You have no hope of really controlling everything that goes on in an enterprise. So it's fallacy to even start thinking that you can and start developing tools that pretend you can. So what he did for General Motors was there were several manufacturing lines, and the scheduling problem they had was they had an assumption that on October 25th paint booth number 7 will paint black truck number 3, line 4. It was never ever going to happen that way, just because of the dynamic nature of manufacturing. So what he did was very, very clever, is he developed a bid system. Each paint booth gets the right to bid on the next vehicle coming off the lines. And that bid's based off of 2 things. That bid is based off of, in this case, the queue, number of trucks in the queue, and the paint color. Because changing over the paint color is a hours-long process, and they can go from lighter to darker without much problem, but going from darker to lighter means they have to clean out the equipment, which means that's another hour. So anything they can do to accommodate that. This process that he developed, this bid-ask system, increased throughput and productivity and saved over, I think it was $1 million or $2 million in paint costs a year, just by being dynamic and just by giving up the fallacy of scheduling. Has anybody seen that study or read that article? No? Okay. Well, take a look on the website and you'll see that article. It's very, very cool. So what I decided was to apply it to projects. Now this is, how many have heard of the Kanban? Okay. So I won't bother explaining that. This is, if I remember straight, from Google or Yahoo's Kanban project methodology. And for those that aren't familiar with Kanban, I explain pull like this. Auto manufacturing is a push-based system. In other words, they push a bunch of manufacturing. McDonald's is a push-based system. They pre-make hamburgers, knowing that somebody's going to come and buy a pre-made hamburger. Caribou and Starbucks, there's no place to store the coffee. They don't store a mochaccino with a double espresso shot of. They make your coffee there. They pull the coffee based on what you order. So it's really a factory floor, right? And so what these folks were doing, as you see, is they have different stage gates. And these you can think of as equivalent to project worker. And so if they don't have anybody slated to do test, then there's only 2 slots for test, right? So as the stories move through the queue from elaboration to development to test to deployment, if there's not a bin to stick it in, then it doesn't move forward. And so it's a very nice system for tracking where your bottlenecks are in a project. Plus they also up above there have an expedited track. And it's a very cool system, but it's still, in my mind, push. Because you're pushing it into the next slot. And there's no way to accommodate and change your slots in the system. Now, in the story that this website's referring to, the project manager will go and say, okay, all these development folks, you're now in test. So you get to test the code you wrote. That'll work out well, I'm sure. I'm sure there'll be no problems with that whatsoever. So, in my mind, this is a better approach, but why not take that bid-ask system? And so this is what the proposal is. Over here you have several different project operators, or project planners, or project managers, sorry. And over here you have a bunch of different task workers, and they're all in a pool. And they manage several different, it's not just developers, it's the infrastructure folks, it's the support design, security, right? Everybody that needs to be involved in the successful accomplishment of getting a project from concept to delivery. And then the QA bucket over on the far right. So it looks pretty standard. But what we're going to do is have these people bid on the next tasks coming off of these projects dynamically. So no longer do you assign a support design person to the mobile project. They have the right to bid on the tasks that are coming out of the queue. And so we can base this bid off of their experience in the task, and their queue, and if you're willing to track it, the number of acceptances that they get. Similar to the seller ratings on Amazon, if you're familiar with that concept. So now they can improve their bid value based on their experience and their quality. So I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. What you notice is we've got one mobile project and one mobile developer up there. So moving forward into the universe, we know that's not going to stay the same, right? So now we've got more projects, and we can accommodate offshore, Odesk, Elance, other expansion. And as these things start to fill out, we've got a dynamic capacity to match the need. Because projects come up, projects go down, the budget cycles happen. There's a budget cycle, right? In Best Buy, they have the freeze. Nothing happens after about October, September, unless it's critical. And then everything rushes in January, February, March, April. So this is an opportunity to expand and include and be dynamic in getting your work done. But now watch. We can, I don't know if the colors came out very well, but this guy changed his color. Now he's a mobile developer. Probably not a very good one yet. But if we get him enough on-the-job tasks, his bid value can go up. So now, from a project management perspective, as we spin up more mobile projects, we can expand to meet the need and keep our workforce dynamically upskilled. So, polling so far, what do you think so far of this idea?
Flexible. I mean, you got the flexibility to, like, well, among other things, you grow your workforce. Anyone who wants to cross-train in another area has the opportunity.
Right.
How could you have, say, the .NET developers bid on a Java project? Those Java developers, someone can only go to Java developers.
Right. Well, or mobile or anything that comes out. There would have to be a mechanism in there that would say, because there's two components to capability from a knowledge worker, right? There's training and there's experience, right? So any type of certification is in lieu of training. In other words, it stands in for, yes, I'm trained. But it's not the experience component. One of the things that was a personal challenge to me when I worked at Best Buy here was they would hire a boatload of IT people, but they had a minimum standard that said you must have 3 years of experience. And we're only going to hire the best of the best because we're Best Buy. And while that's a noble gesture, I would always ask them, where did your 3 years of experience come from? The experience vary because it doesn't, you have to have a method that accommodates getting that. So what it is their bid value is based off of the fact that they don't have the experience, but they do have the training.
So where does so the acceptance of the product or the output is fed back to that guy?
Yeah, it factors into their bid value.
Yeah. Where do the requirements come from?
From the project. It has to be specified at a task level, though. That's part of the additional work in this. Go ahead. Sorry.
Can you adjust the bid values such that, say you got the mobile and the .NET person, not much .NET work, there's a lot of mobile work. .NET work has no experience, doesn't want to get certifications because there's no time.
That never happens, right?
Yeah, but seriously, it's like then the guy just wants to get into mobile. So he's got a week. It would take a mobile developer a day to do it, but he's got a week. And if you can do it in a week, if the customer's happy, so what? As long as the mobile guy would probably want to be part of the UAT at that point. to enable kind of training and mentoring of, you know, bringing people on and getting skills cross-pollinate? Is there some method for doing that in the bid, or just basically change the team to do that, or
So let me reflect back because I want to make sure I'm understanding.
Sure.
Are you saying that there's not a way to accommodate the experience versus training component, or?
To basically have training be on-the-job training rather than going seeking certification. When you need a developer, you need a developer now. You don't need a developer in 6 months.
Okay.
You know, you need someone right now. And
Well,
just something to facilitate cross-pollination.
Well, something that could help with that is market trends, right?
Sure.
I mean, so the developer could say, well, it makes sense for me to go to mobile because there's increasing demand.
so,
Drive it themselves.
well, exactly. I mean, I myself, I think I've got 3 certifications in Apple 5, you know, or IBM PS2. I'm not a personal fan of certification. I'm a personal fan of putting my butt in a seat at Barnes & Noble on a weekend, grabbing a book that thick and learning, right? So yeah, if you look on my resume or on my LinkedIn profiles, you'll see a lot of self-study on there of books that I've read, not classes that I took. So yeah, I think that's a critical component, is that internal motivation. Hold on just a second, go ahead.
Well, my question was kind of went down to what was the solution.
Yeah, please.
But mine was higher level. You sort of alluded to it, but it's really kind of hand wavy, so I'm trying to get a little bit deeper. This idea of bid points, if you will, or whatever you're trying to create here, that whole infrastructure. Have you thought through that very much detail of how that is, how that algorithm works?
Let me start by saying I'm not a database designer, but I play one on TV. So while I certainly understand how it would work in a table format, I frankly don't have a database designed like that, right? That's the point of having to work it through. It would need to be in a table their name assigned to their value, so to be an aggregate value with a different row for each, or sorry, different column for their experience, their quality, and their training. So you need 3 components, and you need a final bid column that makes up that final bid for each task. Yeah, and then I'll come back here.
I feel like a question that hasn't really been answered is
Just one?
is the question of, you don't just have 1 point, you can't just have 1 rating, because you can be really good at this technology,
right,
but know nothing about
absolutely
about some other technology. So far, it sounds like you've been alluding to just a single
like mobile, yeah.
Bid value, which in the
Bid values, you're correct. Yeah, it has to be bid values, because somebody who's a great architecture person, their bid value would be higher for architecture than it would be for mobile.
What would you call this system?
Kanban.
It's a
Kanban scheduling.
I thought that was push.
Well, yes, absolutely. Kanban scheduling. It's a Kanban dynamic scheduling. So I'll be taking nominations for great naming from marketing folks in the room.
Kanban push?
Yeah. Kanban poll is really what it's an attempt to get it back into a more poll-based thing. And I'll show you why in just a second. I want to make sure that we get all these questions answered, but there's another component to this. Yeah.
Maybe I'm getting ahead, but how does an org adapt to this?
That's one of the questions that I want to throw out to the group. That's a discussion point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like this would work great for a really big organization. How would it work for maybe a smaller organization?
I think the opposite.
Or you think the opposite?
You'd have to moonlight to do this. I'm at a huge company. So.
Well, if you go to a smaller company, it'd be on paper. No, just kidding.
I don't know. I wouldn't want to say it's small company.
What are your thoughts? Is this a big company deal? Is it a small company deal? Can you see it working for both?
The implementation would be different between a small.
What's the software that does that?
I'm looking for software developers as well. No, that is a valid point. This is what you might call vaporware, right? Back in the old days. But this is that's really the point of offering that I give to you guys, is this is an opportunity to create something that works in your enterprise. If it is software, it's software. If it is relationships based, then it's relationships. Because I can see a smaller company, you know, I should have actually detailed another part of that brought this on. Quite some time ago, I read an article, and I tried to find it, and I couldn't, where Northwest Airlines, that's probably why I couldn't find it, they had a customer feedback system for customer service for their flight attendants and customer people. And what they had done was they would give secret shoppers a green card and a red card. And so they'd give them 3. And so they'd ask them, as they were flying or as they were interacting with the company, and if they saw something that went well and somebody that went above and beyond, to give them a green card. If they saw somebody that they thought needed motivational improvement, a red card. So imagine you're the poor employee that gets a red card, right? Well, the thing is you don't have to do it. What they told their employees, if you get a red card, you don't have to do anything with us. You don't have to show anyone, you don't have to tell anyone. It's for you, it's feedback for you. But if you get a green card, and that's the point that I'm coming up to next, you can turn it in for prizes. So you can shop at the company store. So it becomes a signal for that employee, if all they're getting is red cards, maybe this is not the place for them. And so in a similar fashion, we have a reward bank. And what we do is each task gets assigned a reward point that they can then cash in the bank. Now this can be as dynamic and varied as the project manager can think of. So it can be extra vacation days. It can be a healthcare discount. It can be a pizza party for the team. But what if you get a task that's a really great task but with a really crappy reward, and you're not into pizza, in which case you didn't eat this afternoon. But then you can take it to the reward bank and exchange it. So the motivating component behind this is to create the real pull in this system. Because what will happen is somebody will have an expedited project and they'll need to reward or incent the workers to put it as a priority. Now in an old corporate style environment that somebody has direct control over the design team or the product team, you can compel them to stay late. You can compel them to work overtime if you're in direct control, if you're direct line. But you can't do that if they're no longer your resource. Make sense? Because if you don't directly control them, the only option you have is to reward them. Of course, I'll get right to you, I can foresee a problem with this in a nuclear arms race of having to up the reward.
Yeah, what stops the project managers from just putting the highest reward on all their own projects?
The budget. Because it has to come out of their project budget.
Fixed amount?
Yep. My suggestion would be to take 10% and allocate it to rewards. Yeah.
How do you structure the bid versus ask? Is it a frequency kind of thing? In which case, if you're the really good Java coder, you can lower your rate because you can crank through things a lot faster, so you make more input in money.
Right.
But then you're that guy who's really good at stuff and is just cranking through code versus the guy who's not so good at stuff, really not doing that much work.
Right.
So how, but if you flip it around and make this is the Java coder who's good at stuff is the valuable resource, you could look at it another way. He could raise his rate because that's how the real world works. If I'm
right.
good, I'm going to price myself until I work 40 hours a week.
Yep.
How do you do that? Is it for the task station, for the guys in the middle there, are they raising their rate if they're really good, or are they lowering their rate?
Well, and it's and that factor is controlled by, or that price is controlled by several factors, including the demand and the supply as well, right? So it really opens up and creates a marketplace that regulates that system. Plus the fact that you might be a really good COBOL programmer, and if you decide to just stick with that and not expand your skills into mobile, at some point you no longer have work because technology moves on. Yeah?
I guess what I would say is that if you're really good, that's going to increase your bid power as far as what you can bid for. And if you're, you know, if there's plenty of Java projects out there and there's several Java programmers, the one who's the better programmer is going to have the higher bid value. So he's going to get accepted, or she is going to get accepted over, you know, so there may be multiple bids for one that has a good reward.
Okay. Those what I was going to, are the workers bidding for the projects or the projects bidding for the workers?
It's actually a little of both.
Okay.
The basis of it is that the workers bid on the task, but the actual piece of it is if you have a crappy task, you need to up your reward value to move it to the head of the queue. So it's a way to normalize and regulate the fact that not everybody wants to do Fortran.
So, I mean, it kind of seems like this is almost bringing it to a freelance type model for the exactly,
Yep.
but except for
Internally.
for everyone, and there's a fair amount of people who would not desire that environment. Otherwise, they would
Yes.
go into freelance instead
Right.
of being full-time employees. Is there any consideration for morale in this?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. And I have seen a need for safety, right? Career stability in certain folks. And so the thought process behind this would be an optional opt-in system. So you could choose on an individual basis to get your tasks and work assignments the old-fashioned way. Or if you're going to do it in this new fashion, you could opt in. So think of how Agile is rolling out into the enterprises, right? Go back to the old days of waterfall, right? And then the transition into Agile. How many here are familiar with or have worked on an Agile project? Okay, that's a significant portion of you. Go back and think about what it was like when Agile first was the buzzword. How many of you were really eager to sign up for that? All right, good. We got some real people who admit it, good. And so that's the case. That laggard, or I'm sorry, the leading edge, the followers, and then the laggards, that cycle's going to still play out. And it goes back to what I was thinking about earlier on. You might have remembered that video, Video Killed the Radio Star, right? Radio's not dead, it just changed its form. Waterfall won't die, and safety structured, traditional project methods won't die, but they will adapt to that which is a best fit for them. Things that are dynamic and not well specified and need to be rapidly deployed, this is a good solution for that.
Well, if you really think through where cloud's going, the disruptions are going to be huge. This might be
That's a good point.
To, rescue those who are going to have jobs that just don't make any sense anymore.
That's a great point. One of the things that I saw was people not moving their career forward. A strange expectation that somebody needed to manage their career for them. And they, well, I can certainly see the romance in that. I can't understand why the system or the structure or the company won't accommodate a career progression, because right now if somebody that's in hardware goes and says, well, I want to be a programmer, well, I don't see you doing that. And so they may not get the opportunity to self-manage their career. Yeah.
So what's the model for adjusting the bid value of the developer? So if he's got a bid value in mobile of, say, 3 or whatever the numerical assignment is, the tasks that he's going to win are predicated on the value, but if the tasks on previous projects are underperformed or over budget, like how does that score get corrected so that it's not carried over? Is that through the
through the UAT?
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the UIT becomes a critical component in this because that's what increases the experience value. Because you may be a fast coder, you may be a fast whatever, but if you're not fast and accurate or fast in quality, you're still not doing the enterprise any good. And so there needs to be an accommodation because how many are fans of Dilbert? Right? One of my favorite cartoons was they decided to pay everybody $1 for every line of code that gets written or something like this, and the guy goes, or for every bug that they correct, right? And he says, well, I'm going to code myself a new BMW. So, this system has to accommodate that people will try to game the system. So there has to be the external auditing and control. But then that means you make friends with the UAT folks. What other comments or suggestions or points that are coming to fore? Yeah.
So I'm a little biased because I come from a technology background, I guess, and I like the idea that it's incentivizing for adding, like supply and demand dynamics into this. But I guess I'm struggling to see how this promotes agility. One of the underlying premises of Agile is that your requirements are going to change drastically from the left side to the right. How does this accommodate that?
So that's a great question. I actually appreciate that. Unfortunately, I couldn't cram everything into the diagram. That's controlled right here by the project team, or the project manager. And so if you imagine this as I know my icons are a little cute, but if you imagine it as a factory assembly line, it's the next task coming off. You're not being assigned to a task, months in the future, right? You're only dealing with what's next. And so if requirements are changing weekly, right, then you can change what you're putting out weekly or daily if you need to. And so it really gets controlled on the project manager side, the one who's responsible for the budget of the project. Because that's where all the change is being driven in that interaction with that consumer or that customer. Oh, now I want it with blue, now I want it with red, now I want it with a button over here. Well, you do realize what this is going to do to the project cost and timeline, right? Yes. Okay.
How does that get adapted to the point that you're talking about then? Because now the project starts for 10 points with the changes. The point's going to be out of place.
So, say more about that. I'm sorry, I don't quite understand.
Because before you start the project, you would say, okay, the person who's bidding for it gets, let's say, 10 points. Now, during the process with the Agile, it's changing. Now, how does that point change? Do you up the point? Do you down the point?
You're talking about the reward point?
Or requirements changing. The requirement changes. The bid, and I think the
Points are attached to tasks, not the project.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's an individualized task.
Let's say the task changes while you're working on it.
Yeah, killer fill is a phrase from stock trading. So in other words, if it doesn't get filled, it gets killed. So yeah, you'd have to have the ability to kill the task, which blows for the guy that was working on it. But that's a challenge that you have to accommodate. Yeah.
So it seems like what I'm kind of envisioning as the issue with this is kind of the devil in the details as far as how whatever formula that this is put together, because there's so many different variables. One that I mentioned before is like specific technologies, but going beyond that, each specific project would have domain knowledge associated with it, and someone who's previously worked on it will have more of that domain knowledge than someone who is good in technology but doesn't have that domain knowledge of that project. And it would be most effective to have a consistent team rather than people switching in and out, taking on small tasks in here. That works for some things, but other tasks involve grand knowledge of kind of the grand scheme of things that doesn't seem to fit in a task-based
Correct.
model.
Well, and no, absolutely. So a couple things that I want to kind of reiterate at this point. Number one, no one should mistake this presentation for an application, right? This is a brainstorming session for you to think of a new way to look at the work that you do on a daily basis. That's my purpose today, is to cause you to have a different frame of reference. And if nothing changes because it's too challenging to implement some grand idea like this up here, I concur. Now, having said that, is there room to kill radio? Well, maybe we can find a way to slide in beside it with some new thinking, just like Agile did. Because Agile is and has value in the workplace. But it doesn't necessarily accommodate all things. Agile is another factor that doesn't accommodate, well, the corporate knowledge. And go ahead, you had another comment?
Yeah, so I see this as more useful as a conceptual model that, like,
Yep.
I can't envision a well-implemented, like, mechanical, like, program that would could calculate all these values just because there's so many different factors that go into it. But I do see the value in it conceptually as far as kind of use this to shape decisions but not make decisions.
Yeah, because here's the thing, if you're a project, how many are, again, project managers? Are you responsible for your employees' career development? And if not, who is? They are, right? But where do we meet them halfway, and where do we help them by getting them the experience level that they need to keep their career current, so that our next project, when it becomes mobile or cloud or whatever the next hot new technology is, where are we as project managers going to find capable, knowledgeable, skilled, and experienced workers to deal with that? If we as a community don't take responsibility for helping them get to that point. Yeah.
So it seems like this sets up the marketplace where these changes can be asked for and worked on. And that facilitation is as much as anyone can be expected to do.
Absolutely. Thank you for that comment. Is that I would agree with what you said. Is that our mission here is just to find ways to accommodate our next iteration. So, let me ask you some questions. How would you socialize this into your company? How did how did Agile get socialized into your company?
Starts with people who really believe in it, for one. I mean, that's kind of the starting point for getting any kind of changes. Not just thinking it's a good idea, but actually feeling that this must happen. This must happen.
Okay.
So having that
The passion to act.
right, and acting on it and actually putting forth more effort than your job requires because you strongly believe that this is the right way to go. At least that's the way I've seen.
Yeah.
That's the only way I've seen change happen is when that's the case.
And if I can, without getting specific, generally how well does that go?
Where I work pretty well, but it depends on the company and how open they are to change.
Other comments?
It seems like the project managers would have to have pretty deep domain knowledge of what exactly their teams are doing, and that has not been my experience. They're good at managing, they're good at dealing with bureaucracy, they're good at dealing with money, they're good at finding things, they're good at keeping schedules. They don't have a clue as to the technical details involved in day-to-day operation. And that's fine, they don't want it, and they trust us with our estimations, but in pricing this, getting the pricing model straightened out, they would have to be a lot more in tune with requirements of what exactly each task involves.
And at a marketplace level, not just with their own tasks, but everybody else's.
At the very least, they'd have to be able to filter it, saying, yeah, you got to have this experience, but if you don't have experience in Ruby, Python, and Perl, you might come pretty close, and you can pick up Ruby. But if you don't have any experience in dynamic languages, forget it.
Yeah.
But just having someone with that kind of
acumen, yeah.
kind of knowledge is hard to find someone who could do that. And, otherwise, if you could find something like that, it seems like what it really is it's kind of, if you look at it from the programmer, from the middle guy's perspective, the coder, it's one guy's goal is not another guy's goal. And,
right.
The one, so you'd have a project, if you're a Ruby coder, it might be worth 7 points, but if you're a Java coder, it's worth 1 point because you're not going to be able to do it well. We're not going to pay you well to do it because you know the domain. And so you have me as a coder, I have a limited number of
That's
days
interesting.
to crank this through. So over a 1 week period, I earned 7 points by working on the task I'm best suited for, whereas the Java guy would earn 1 point working on that same task. But then being able to filter, assign the points based on my skills, that's the hard part. So
how would you motivate an employee that wasn't good at a task to do it if you were going to give them less points?
I think that if they don't have enough points coming in, they'll take what they can get, and eventually they'll get better at it and get more points. That itself is its own reward. But then it comes down to you get the old boys club going on of you're
yep.
3 rock stars and everybody hates them silently. And how do you really avoid that? You can't. It's a hard thing to get around. You have to crank up people's experience levels artificially and say, okay, you've been here, you've worked on Ruby stuff, and you've worked on Java stuff for 6 weeks. We're going to give you half the experience points to the guy who's been doing it for 10 years. The guy that who knows? I mean, that may piss people off, but really, when it comes to arcane stuff you gain over years and years, there's diminishing returns. You do something for 2 years, you know a lot.
Yeah.
Or you know a little bit more.
Well, and the other piece, the component that's not built into this is mentoring. Mentoring would help up that skill set as well, but that's not. I don't have a component built in for that.
I was just going to say, this is starting to sound like a role-playing game.
Oh, interesting.
Where you're going through, well, not role-playing. Yeah, like Dungeons
Yeah,
and Dragons.
yeah.
Where you're going for like developing your skills and abilities. You start out with a set of numbers, and then you go through, like, you build numbers over time, and you're able to take on bigger and better things because it looks like you have the ability to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way of looking at it. Thank you for that.
I'm just trying to think of the silos and the structures that would block it. I mean, I accepted this quickly because I'm thinking about, I'm trying to use somebody else's process right now, and it's like they're kind of an ivory tower-ish type of place, and 4 months later I still don't have what I need from them, but I also don't have funding for my direction. So it's almost, I'm already talking to my management about creating like an incentive type of thing.
Okay.
Market, like if they don't do it fast enough, somebody over there can do it. Because we also have multiple people that could do it.
So this tied in with Kickstarter would help you tremendously.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Sure.
Thanks. I hope I was able to help.